Indiana Jones is always armed during his global adventures, and his weapon of choice has been big, old-fashioned revolvers. From his first appearance in Raiders of the Lost Ark in 1981, one of my favorite films that heavily influenced my own path to a career in history, to the atrocious Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, Dr. Jones always wields a revolver, and I'm sure we will be seeing the same in the latest adventure, The Dial of Destiny, hitting cinemas very soon. And you may have also noted that, as well as using different makes of revolver, Indy almost always loses his weapons during the course of his adventures, which probably explains why his make and model of firearm changes frequently as he has to purchase replacements. In Raiders of the Lost Ark, Indiana Jones first loses his revolver in the scene inside the hidden temple in the Peruvian jungle, when after barely escaping with his life and the golden idol, Indy is captured by his nemesis, French archaeologist Belloc, and some indigenous tribesmen. Indy is forced to hand over his revolver to Belloc, and we see that Indy is armed with a Smith & Wesson M1917 revolver, a .45 ACP officer's sidearm from World War I. This 6-shot, large-frame weapon was also manufactured by Colt and was enormously popular on the civilian market between the wars. Smith & Wesson manufactured 150,000 between 1917 and 1920, and it makes perfect sense that Dr. Jones, a World War I veteran himself, would be carrying one in 1936. Later on, the film's action transfers to Nepal, and before leaving the US, Jones tosses another Colt M1917 into his suitcase, presumably his spare weapon, and uses this during the fight in Marion Ravenwood's bar. During the fight, he switches to an out-of-character weapon that he is also carrying, a Browning High Power. The High Power originated in 1935, so would have been a state-of-the-art weapon for Raiders of the Lost Ark, and is a single-action, semi-automatic, with for its time an enormous magazine capacity of 13 rounds. Very useful when fighting Nazis in Nepal. However, by the time the action moves to Cairo, Egypt, Indy is once again packing his faithful spare Smith & Wesson M1917, which he uses to great comedic effect to dispatch a huge swordsman, and then to take out a truck that he thinks is carrying Marion. We next see the M1917 used by Indy during the fight with the Luftwaffe mechanic when Indy tries to commandeer the plane the Germans want to use to fly the Ark of the Covenant to Germany. He uses the M1917 to shoot the lock off the cockpit canopy to save Marion. The High Power makes another appearance during the scene on the Bantu Wind when the ship is boarded by the Germans. But Jones loses his High Power to Belloc just before the opening of the Ark of the Covenant. The High Power on board the ship is not the same one that Indy used in the bar in Nepal, being a much later World War II era Inglis-manufactured High Power, a minor continuity and wardrobe error. In Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, during the film's opening scenes in Shanghai, Indy is now wielding a Colt Official Police, an old weapon that first appeared in 1908 and would remain in production until 1969. A medium-frame, double-action, 6-round revolver, chambered in the .38 special cartridge, it was originally called the Colt Army Special, until Colt began marketing it to law enforcement from 1927 onwards. During the car chase scene in Shanghai, Indy fires the weapon, but then hands it to Willie Scott, who promptly drops the red-hot weapon from the car. The pistol that hits the road is not in fact the same one that Indy fires, being a Smith & Wesson Model 10, a very popular service revolver that entered service in 1899 and is still manufactured today, some 6 million having been made. By the time of the third film, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, another big favourite of mine, Jones is now using a British revolver. We see him packing a suitcase at his home before setting out to find his father, and he tosses a Webley WG Army model, chambered in .455 Ely, into his case. This is the civilian version, the very famous Webley Mark VI, the British officer's sidearm of World War I and throughout the Empire. Unlike the Smith & Wesson revolver and the Colt that Indy has used in the past, the Webley is a top-break or self-extracting revolver dating from 1887, which would remain in production until 1970. The .455 ammunition makes it one of the most powerful revolvers of the era. Indy uses the Webley at the scenes at Castle Brunwald and on the Zeppelin airship, and in the scene where Jones and his father are strafed by German fighters. He also empties the 6-shot revolver during the tank fight scene in the desert, until he is forced to hand it over to Walter Donovan in the Canyon Temple. Fast forwarding from 1938 to the next film, Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, which is set in 1957. Indy only uses the Webley to intimidate a guard during the Peruvian cemetery scene, and later has the weapon confiscated by Irina Spalko and her Soviet goons. After that, Indy doesn't have a revolver or indeed a holster and belt. So the question is, what kind of weapon will Dr. Jones be wielding in the upcoming film, considering that 45 minutes of it are set during World War II with a de-aged Harrison Ford, and the remainder in 1969? I have the feeling that the makers will probably continue the story chronologically, and will see Indy with a Webley 455 one last time. Many thanks for watching. Please subscribe and share, and also visit my audiobook channel, War Stories with Mark Felton. You can also help to support both of my channels at PayPal and Patreon. Details in the description box below.